Welcome to the Wild Physio Podcast with your host, Andrew Wild. Today it's an individual podcast and the topic is longevity. I'm seeing way too much stuff online about longevity and people are just getting confused and it's becoming a bit ridiculous when the basics are the things you need to focus on. So the big six pillars of longevity is what I'm going to call it today. And it's basic stuff, and you're probably already going to guess what these six things are. The first pillar is a balanced diet rich in protein, fiber, vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts, grains, lean cuts of meat, fish, etc. So the Mediterranean diet has really good, solid evidence behind it for longevity. I think the big thing here is everyone, especially in Western society, knows what quality looks like. So we're talking about the fiber, the protein, the vegetables, fruits, nuts, grains, etc. But a lot of people don't understand how much of that quality they should eat to reach their goals. So quantity is king. So working with a health professional for you to understand how much to eat to reach your goals, and they are aesthetic goals, but also their goals for health and longevity long term. So working with a dietitian, nutritionist, etc., is a great idea. The next pillar, number two, is maintain a healthy body weight. So BMI and waist circumference is a good way to do it rather than just focus on BMI, especially if you lift weights. So BMI on a population level is quite a good metric, especially for people that don't lift weights. However, on the individual level, if someone lifts weights and they have a fair bit of muscle mass, BMI isn't the greatest measurement. It was designed for Caucasian men all those years ago. So populations like Polynesians that have a lot of muscle mass, it's not the greatest measurement for people like that, but using the combination of BMI and waist circumference is. So ideally maintaining a healthy body weight and also maintaining a healthy waist circumference, and the combination of both is a great way forward to maximize your longevity. So number three is VO2 max, which is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can absorb and utilize during intense exercise, which reflects how fit you are effectively and your cardiovascular fitness. So this is your cardio-based stuff, and that could also include your step count, walking, fast walking, stairs, running, jumping, any type of sport that you play, swimming, biking, etc. So it's doing anything that raises your heart rate. So you could train in zone two a lot, and Peter Attia talks about that. Training in zone two, 2 or 3 times a week for 30 to 60 minutes. It could be longer, could be shorter, but you're trying to ideally get enough exercise for the week. Now, the World Health Organization's guidelines are 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week, and 2 strength training sessions per week as well. Now, we'll get into strength in a second, but in terms of the 150 to 300 minutes moderate intensity, that is your zone two stuff. So it's 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. So 220 minus your age, and then figure out 60 to 70% of that. And you want to try and stay in that zone for zone two for longish periods. And you could do that for 20, 30, 60 minutes every day or every second day. And then you could also do some high intensity stuff, and that's 75 to 150 minutes per week. And the minutes that you do in the vigorous side of things, the 75 to 150 do count comparatively to the 150 to 300. So you can use a combination of the two. So that would be not really being able to talk. So vigorous intensity exercise, you can't maintain a conversation. The zone two, you'd be able to maintain a conversation, but you wouldn't be able to string long sentences together or multiple sentences together. So it's going for a reasonably quick walk at about 5Ks an hour or more is deemed moderate intensity exercise. But that could also, depending on how fit you are as well, if you're fitter, your zone two will be at a faster pace. So, e.g., someone super fit that's a triathlete would be able to jog comparatively to someone that's not as fit. They might only have to walk or go up some stairs, and they'll be in effectively zone two. The next pillar, number four, is muscle strength and muscle mass. So I love this quote, strong thighs save lives. I always say that. Strength training is key as we age. We lose muscle mass as we age, roughly 1% per year from the age of 40, 2 to 4% of strength per year from the age of 40, and roughly about 8 to 10% of power per year from the age of 40. So you need to mitigate that by strength training, doing things like jumping, plyometrics, these type of things will try and mitigate the power losses as well. And playing sport, change interaction, doing all these type of things will mitigate those changes as well. Muscle strength is highly correlated with reducing your more or cause mortality risk more than muscle mass. However, you'll get both benefits by strength training anyway. So, point is just lift weights regularly. That's the key. So, a good example of this, there's some studies that I'll throw around here as well. But a study by Lee et al. In 2018 on older adults found that low muscle strength significantly increases all-cause mortality risk. The odds ratio there is 2.34, more so than low muscle mass. The odds ratio there is 1.47. So, point is, muscle strength is fundamental for healthy aging. And ideally, you would maintain muscle mass long term as well. And you'll get that if you maintain a quality diet combined with the strength training. You'll obviously lose muscle as you get older, if you're in your 70s and 80s, but you can try and just hold on for dear life as much as possible. And you need to stimulate the muscle. And the other thing is obviously stimulating the bone with strength training combined with jumping, plyometrics, these type of things, long term to try and just reduce the risk of becoming frail. You just don't want to become frail. So, lift some tin. That is the secret. Number five is sleep. So 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, ideally. We know that people that are underslept consistently, if they're in a calorie deficit, they will lose more lean body mass. And one of the reasons why this is the case is because there's an increase in ghrelin, your hunger hormone. We touched on this in the podcast with Charlie, that study by Nedevelcher in 2014 showed that the people that slept 8.5 hours versus 5.5 hours, the ones in the 8.5 hour group lost more fat and less lean body mass, and then the 5.5 group lost more lean body mass, which is not ideal. So lean body mass being muscle. So sleep is so important. It's how we recover. It's your number one recovery tool. So get enough sleep. Can be a little bit tricky for people that do shift work, but try your best. Make your room dark, ideally cool. 18 to 19 degrees is optimal. And try and have good sleep hygiene, making sure that it's super dark and cool and these type of things, and change your sheets weekly, ideally. Don't be a grot, and go from there. The last one, the sixth pillar, is social circles, and this just does not get spoken about enough. It's so important to maintain your social circles as we age. We are effectively social beings. So you need to maintain your friendships. Your family are important. They are. However, you still need friends. You can't just rely on your family. So one way to put this is, if you look at the blue zones, which are kind of being debunked. So some of the blue zones are Okinawa, Sardinia, the Seventh-day Adventists in the States. So some of these blue zones have effectively been debunked because some of them lie about their age, but they've got a high percentage of centenarians, so people that live to 100. And I think one of the things that they do really well in these communities is they don't isolate the elderly, and they actually bring them back into the community. And a good example is in Sardinia or Sicily and other places around through Italy. When someone gets old, a nonna, say for instance, gets old, they actually bring them back into the community, and they might go and start living with their daughter or their son and their family. So they bring them back into the community, and there's a real community feel there. And one of the big reasons for potentially the longevity that they gain is obviously diet and all these type of things. Genetics plays a part, blah, blah, blah. But the social circles are so important. And I feel like, considering what I've read about social circles, imagine you had two twins, and one twin was very social and outgoing, and the other twin was a bit of an introvert and they didn't see many people and they were a bit of a hermit. If you Both of them had similar diets and exercise And over a lifespan, you would assume that the one that is a little bit more social or very social comparatively would survive longer on this earth. So it's just so important. And a study called by Rico Ureb et al. In 2018 conducted a meta-analysis that looked at 77,000 participants and investigated the link between loneliness and all-cause mortality, and it found that loneliness significantly increased the risk of death, more so for men, which is interesting. The findings underscore loneliness as an underrated independent risk factor for mortality beyond the effects of depression. Point is, maintain your friends, be social. We're social beings. Now, a podcast on longevity could take hours, but they're the pillars. They're the most important things. So focus on those and don't get stuck trying to listen to all these little things that people think are going to help you live a long, healthy life. Like if you have an ice bath twice a week for the rest of your life, you're going to live until you're 100. It's just not the case. You need to focus on the basics. And at the end of the day, a lot of influencers get paid by these companies that promote, say, for instance, ice baths or saunas or whatever it is. The most important things are those pillars that we've talked about. And if you need any more information, please hit me up because we've got a new section in the current Your Body Bible edit that we're doing on factors influencing all cause mortality risk and risk of chronic diseases. And we go through a multiple amount of points, and we've kind of touched on it today. So step count, fitness, we've touched on that. Strength and muscle mass, balance, excessive sedentary behavior, sitting 6 to 8 hours per day, not ideal. Smoking, obviously you wouldn't smoke. Ideally, if you do smoke, stop smoking as soon as you can. So quit. So Quinn et al. In 2020 explored the impact of light cigarette smoking for 5 years, sorry, 5 or less cigarettes per day on all-cause mortality, and it found that even light smokers face a significant increase risk of death from all causes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and respiratory disease, compared to non-smokers. Point is, don't smoke, and if you do, try and quit. Alcohol consumption, ideally, you don't have too much alcohol per week. Current recommendations in Australia are no more than 10 for the week and no more than 4 in a session. Some countries have taken a tougher stance on that. As long as you're keeping things reasonably low, and we need to factor in something here. We've already talked about the social isolation side of things. Try not to socially isolate yourself. And people often isolate themselves if they don't drink alcohol and they go off alcohol for a period of time. Look, a few drinks here and there, and you increase how often you are social. That's a good thing. However, you need to factor in there's too much alcohol versus none. You need to find a sweet spot. I'd say 2 to 5 drinks per week is a good sweet spot, ideally none. Going to no alcohol beers and wine, that's an option. But at the same time, drinking every now and then is fun, and you have fun with your friends and you're not socially isolating yourself. You're having a good time. Frank Sinatra has a good quote. He said, I feel sorry for people that don't drink because when they wake up in the morning, that's the best they'll feel all day. And I'm not saying go out and get drunk all the time. I'm not. I'm just saying that social drinking can be a lot of fun. So don't just eliminate it completely. However, no alcohol is obviously better than some alcohol, but just keep the amount to a minimum, ideally. We've touched on weight and BMI. We've touched on diet. Chronic stress, we haven't touched on that. Obviously, reducing your stress would be ideal. And a study by Brun Rasmussen in 2022 found that increased allostatic load significantly correlates with higher all-cause mortality risk. So managing stress is critical for optimal health. We've touched on social isolation, sleep. High cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. This is something to touch on. This study by Sung et al. In 2019 found that there was a U-shaped association with individuals' LDL levels, both those with the lowest LDL-C levels and elevated LDL-C levels. When I say C, I mean cholesterol, were at increased risk of all-cause mortality compared to those with the recommended moderately low levels, and moderately low levels being 120 to 139 milligrams. And a couple of non-modifiable factors that we haven't sort of touched on: psychological, genetic, body types, shapes and sizes, air pollution, socioeconomic factors. So these are other factors that contribute to longevity, and we need to factor those in. Obviously, genetics play a role, they do, but how you live your life is something that you can obviously change. You can't change your genetics. So the six pillars: balanced diet, maintain a healthy body weight, BMI and waist circumference are the key there. VO2 max, so be reasonably fit. Ideally, the fitter you are, the better. Muscle strength and muscle mass, sleep, and social circles. So that is the longevity podcast. I hope that helped, because I feel like there's a lot of information out there and it can be confusing. Please let me know if you would like more of these type of podcasts. And as usual, stay strong.